Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. And wherever in the beautiful world you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hope you're enjoying your week. And of course, we're right in the middle of the week and it's Double Trouble Wednesday. Fantastic lineup today again. Part two of the Oprah's Assets, Decoding the Mansions, Money, and Global Connections. And if you didn't catch last week's show, part one, please do. I mean, it's so super interesting. And then, of course, the second show, we're going to be at, it's now 1:30, 3:30, 2 hours from now. We're talking about cat people and the black nobility. So join us for that. And of course, Jessie will be joining us in just a few minutes. So before that, ta-da, let's just bring up the schedule for the week. Okay, if you missed last night's show with Lynn Hageman, really great show. She speaks about her healing as a survivor, great tips that she gives to survivors and on how what really has worked for her as well. So catch that one if you haven't already. And of course, Double Trouble with Jessie today. Solutions with Chanti tomorrow. I'm on the Mirror Universe series. Join me for that. And Dr. Dennis Carroll tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, South African time, Central Africa time. And then, of course, Friday, drop in with Chanti on Aquarius Rising Africa. I'm busy with the From Settlement to Current Crisis. We're looking at the frequency because we know the invisible creates the visible, right? So we're looking at the extraction frequency. Pretty much that's in Africa. And if it's in Africa, South Africa, it's going to be everywhere else in the world, right? So, yeah, very interesting. I'm loving that series, actually. Just so many twists and turns. And in fact, this week I'm talking about Dr. Wouter Besson. And he's known as South Africa's Dr. Death. He was also held accountable at the Truth and Reconciliation Committee a couple of years back, but of course has been set free. So we talk about some of the disgusting experiments and things he was doing here in South Africa during the apartheid era. And then, of course, Leo Zagami on Friday night and Sunday Loop at 6 o'clock in the evening as well. Of course, all of this South Africa time, Central Africa time. And that's where we play our old reruns or shows we haven't aired before. So yay, welcome everybody. It's lovely to see you all again. And yeah, it's always nice to see where you are. So yeah, drop us a comment in the chat. And I would love to know, any of you guys who have intel, any over and above this as well. We've done quite a few shows on Oprah here, on what she's doing and has done in South Africa, and also looking deeper into this, and always value your comments. So without any further ado, ta-da, Madame,
Hello.
lovely to see you. How are you?
You as well, doing well. Yeah,
Great.
things. I think things with Oprah are going to get interesting, and so much with her. And I know we're going to cover. We've got some exciting shows coming up too, where we'll get into some other individuals, kind of in that spectrum of the Oprah era. So,
Absolutely. I'm loving it coming up because these are the mainstream figures, right? These are the
mhm,
people that they've really had out there, and they're part of the baby boomer clan. I'm not a baby
right?
boomer, but it's like they're taking out the golden oldies first, right? Actually, we
Hmm.
can't say that. There's a lot of youngsters as well,
Yeah.
that are sort of coming under the microscope. But it's good because it's the way that people in the mainstream. Yes, I saw Dolly died, but we're actually going to be chatting about that quite soon.
We
And
are, yeah, the stranger
we
things
are.
surrounding
I,
Dolly's death.
we have so many topics right now. We could be covering 10 shows a day and still have enough. But
Mhm.
hey, guys, it's all coming. Okay.
Right.
Yay, Jess. Anyway, Anything? What do you maybe you want to share with us? What you're
Yeah, I
doing?
got lots of shenanigans going on, Shanti, as always.
I
So
love it.
coming up in September here, the let me get the dates quick. Sorry, I forgot. Um, what's the date? I guess I don't have the date on there. Well, September 24th and 25th, I've got my next decodes, and we're going to just keep going deeper and deeper. We've talked a lot about some of the different locations that the priestesses use. We've talked about some of the grand high priestesses like Gloria Vanderbilt. But where are the places where they do their training? So on the 24th of September, I'm going to start getting into the cisterns. And there are going to be some very interesting things coming out of that. We're going to look at the Ishten cisterns, and there's some secret Kabbalah knowledge I'm going to get into, decoding the coat of arms for Istanbul that is going to directly connect and link to the underworld and some of their Kabbalah beliefs about the underworld. So if you're wanting to make sense of the Muslim Brotherhood and how it all interconnects, I encourage you to sign up for that. And are those things used for more than just water reserves? What do they do with the cisterns? And then I'm also on the 25th, I'm going to start to get into cultic libraries and decoding the libraries. This is another building and structure that they use, and we're going to get into occultic practitioners, forbidden magic, hauntings, paranormal phenomena, and restricted knowledge. And this is going to kick it up quite a notch. So I'm excited about those two workshops coming up, and encourage you guys to check those off your lists and register at kingdomlivingwithjessie.com.
Sounds amazing, and
Yeah.
lots of shenanigans coming up now. That's
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah.
Anyway, do you want to open for us in prayer, please?
Yeah, let's do that. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and this time together. We ask that you would bless our technology, our airwaves, our equipment, and our conversation today. Lord, we thank you that you are bringing all things to light, that you are bringing the truth and letting it be known. And Lord, we thank you that there is a day that you hold to account those who have wronged others, those who have wronged children, Lord. There's a day that you call each one to come to account. So we thank you for that, and we ask that you would bless our conversation today in your powerful name, Jesus. Amen. Oops, hold on. Oh, you got to unmute, Shanti.
Always. I was just looking at some of the comments about my cat, which is so funny because she's so shy. She never normally shows herself. And last week she showed herself. And we're
Yeah,
talking about the cat people. So yeah, she's showing up for the cat people
just
today.
showing up, right? Just
Oh,
like
exactly. It's cute. I love it.
she's got
Okay, well,
something to say about that.
totally, totally. I mean, she's amazing, though. I mean, and she's a little bit chubby, So it's like, when you pick her up and she allows me to pick up, there she is. Look, she's now appeared again. I mean, that's so interesting because she's so seldom here.
Right?
But
That's
when you pick her up,
hilarious.
it's like holding a baby. I love it. She's like heavy, and it's just like, oh, it's divine. Anyway,
Fat
so
cat. There's nothing better than a fat cat, but
yeah, absolutely.
someday we'll
Chunky
have to
cat.
do maybe for the next episode, I'll share some humorous cat stories. We had quite the cat. She was hilarious. She was a staunchy little old lady. But anyway,
I think as cat moms and dads could probably definitely have good laughs at that because, man, they are funny things. That's for sure. They are hilarious. They like definitely believe they just queen, right? I'm
Oh
just
yeah,
queen.
definitely.
You just serve me, human.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Anyway, wonderful. Yay. But we're going to be talking more about Oprah's assets, decoding the mansions,
Yeah.
money, and global connections. So, again, for if any of you guys haven't watched last week's show, there was part one. Please grab that. That is on the playlist of Jessie and all her previous shows as well. And yeah, and then I look forward to that. So, I'm going to step back and let
All right.
you do your thing.
Yeah, let's go ahead and put up the first slide. And, last week we began to break down her different assets. And what I really want to connect in this is the overall picture. Oprah is somebody who has been the largest supplier for the Brotherhood system and the sovereign military order. It's not just that she's got all this wealth and she's buying all these properties. They're very strategic, and we have to understand how to look for that. She purposely buys things that are connected to certain areas, and that goes along with novelty items, things in those areas that she's helping to move and supply for different rituals. But beyond rituals, you get the underground markets, you get the connection with the training programs with the Department of Defense for the children, and the supply of foreign militaries. It's important to understand that the sovereign military order is a foreign military. And really, she's investing highly in those programs. And we're going to get more into that. So let's go to the next one and look at one of her next properties. She has the Madron Eagle off of Orca Island in San Juan County, Washington. This property is massive, and it literally sits very close. You've got a straight up there. That waterway, connects. You got Canada not far. You've got different access, particularly, access from there to the Aleutian Islands and the whole Canada area. And in that, I did a decode a long time ago on Orcas Island and how from there through those straits and those upper waterways, you get access all the way over to like the Superior Lakes. You get access even further, going all the way to New York. And you get a lot of the sailboats that are going to travel those routes. And there would be different things that they would be doing to provide scholarships, opportunities to kids. Like I've talked about my testimony in connection to the Chicago area. You had, politicians, people that would be investing in the boating and the yacht clubs, and they literally would be, taking kids with them at different times. And I would witness, kids all getting on the boats, and then not the same number of kids would return, even though supposedly it was a scholarship thing in connection to the Chicago and Madison universities. And they would then say, oh, all the kids just, their parents picked them up along the way. But I knew the truth. Like I knew they were doing stuff to kids. And so you get Oprah highly involved in that scene. And the Orcas Island area, you're going to get that under the Archdiocese of Seattle. Now, that area is massively connected to Bill Gates and his foundations, but you also get some hidden individuals behind the scenes and connected to the Bill Gates foundations. One, you're going to have his wife, Melinda Gates, and she is highly connected to transportation companies, where they're moving products. They've funneled their money now into school systems where they're working with things like Donor's Choice, Bright Spaces, and even Bright Spaces goes beyond schools where they're even uh, funding, putting money into spaces like that might be connected to your Head Starts or clinics, all of these things. And when we understand that those things, the World Health kind of concept and things connected to that gets into a lot of the immigration things, and them funneling the money, bringing in lots of kids into schools, clinics, communities, churches. And then what happens to the kids? Where do they go? um, so this is a way that they're doing it. But then you also have behind the scenes, the Gore family. So Al Gore and his wife also having similar foundations and investing in similar things right alongside of the Gates foundations and Oprah as well. And so we've got to look, follow the money trails. When you add up, it's just the amount of money this woman has spent on land and properties is absolutely crazy. You're like, this is billions of dollars. And, her properties definitely, um, are situated in very unique places. Um, the Orcas Island is going to be close to the Naval Air Station on Whidbey Island, but you also have the Puget Sound area. You get the Salish Sea region, all of that. Um, she bought this property in 2018 for about 8.3 million and supposedly sold it in 21 for $14 million. Um, who did she sell it to? Who, who's all interconnected with that Orcas Island area? 2021 also happens to be the year, and this is interesting, where George Soros stepped down from heading up the Council of the System, and you had Barack Obama step up, Oprah Winfrey coming right alongside of him, and the two of them starting to push special educational funds, which that was what George Soros's humanitarian effort was. So you had both Obama and Oprah Winfrey picking that up. So that was interesting. And it just so happened to be the same time she sold this. I don't think it means she's washed her hands of this area. I think there's a lot more involved. Let's go to the next one. So, as we're looking at the areas, we can know what brotherhood are involved and what are some of the unique things, uh, going on in those areas. So, of course, the San Juan County is known, for the killer whales. Where do those connect to? Like, where are those supplied to? Back in the 1980s, you had a few places where orcas were really supplied. The first were, the um, kind of the big aquariums, and Chicago, Illinois was one of the largest areas where they had the live orcas at the aquariums, and they would do shows there. It's all downtown, And on that strip beyond the aquarium, you also have the art museum, you have the science and industry museum, you have all of these, you know, museum type things where you're going to have specialty funding going in. So that was one of the areas, I believe she was supplying to. You also had Florida being another huge one with the aquariums, with the live orca whale shows. And then you also had Carderock Naval War Center, where they have some. So there were different military bases where these orcas were being supplied. When we look at that symbology, there's a significant image, and that's the image of a sailboat. Now, that sailboat is very specific in the Brotherhood, and you'll find it in the Boy Scout badges. Um, so it's connected to the junior neo-Nazi training programs in the system. When you see it, it's usually dealing with boys, and that could be anywhere from, it could be younger, but usually it's your boys that are age 12, and that's going to connect to different forms of thelemic magic and the raising up. Like when you look at the Boy Scout symbols, they also will have that fleur de lis representing the Priory of Zion, and you get boys that they're raising up in the system to be those that would be considered princes. It can include escorts, that they're all sorts of things in their different training programs. So, do they use Orcas Island for special things? Absolutely. And that training is both on the water as well as on the island itself, as well as underneath the island. And that is going to include some underground submarine things. Now, the Archdiocese of Seattle is very unique as well. You see kind of like that triangle in the middle, and then how the crest, the sides of it kind of come out in this weird shape. Now, that shape is very specific. I call it kind of like the wings shape almost. But you will get the higher level Eastern stars, their capes are in that form where they almost look like wings, and then they'll have a dress on underneath. So you get a high training area up there for your upper level Eastern Star women. And then we see these weird crosses in there that almost look like stakes. You're like, what's up with those crosses? Those are just really weird. That cross formation you will find in the sigils for Lilith and Ashtaroth. So at one level, it represents those who are going to have altars to Lilith and Ashtaroth. But at another level, this is going to connect back to certain things and certain places. We're going to find in the future that even Pope Leo is connected to these things, and you get a certain group and line of women that are called the Ursuline. And so it's a very specific group, and they're highly connected to vampirism. Um, so even notice the stripes. Where do we see kind of those two lines, those two stripes? That can be connected to both regional leaders, but also that can be connecting back to forms of water magic, different things that they're doing with that, and certain areas where they're going to be doing, the red is going to represent at one layer in this image water and fire, and you'll get the white representing ice training under the water. The naval base that we get near that area is going to be your Whidbey Island. And notice how they also have a triangle in their image. And notice at the bottom where you've got the priestess laurels, we see those two lines carried over. Only, rather than the red or white, we see yellow, which is common for that, usually represents your priestesses, like with the yellow roses. So you got to ask, like, why does the military base, why are they using some of the same imagery and symbols that the diocese is using? Like, what in the world? The diocese is connected to the Vatican. They're under the authority of the Holy See. And, you know, they're part of a sovereign territory. Why in the world is there a connection with an air state, a naval air station? Like, there shouldn't be any connection between the two, but there is. And we see that connection right in their symbols. And we see in the Whidbey Island the mountains in the back representing your odor of Odin. We see that same mountain, being part of the sigil for the San Juan County, representing that order of Odin. We also see the flying eagle. And when we see the eagle with its wings like that, it represents your 33rd degrees. Well, why do they show in both images the eagle over the mountain? It's because you have things under that territory. You've got an extension to the base that's under the water and under the land there. So, they would use that symbol to represent your eagle's nests in high places, and meaning that they've got massive underground military facilities built under the mountain. You get NORAD, the same thing. And when you see the caps on the mountains like that in symbology, like the way NORAD is structured, literally you've got, we'll just call them UFO, like unidentified flying objects, but the military knows what they are. You literally get slats in the mountains where they're able to fly out. But, literally NORAD is an arc. It's like a massive spaceship that is 80 stories long, and it literally sits down in the mountain, and then they've got that top part comes down over it. It's hard for us to understand that something could be that big or operate in that way. We want to believe what we see. We want to believe that top of the mountain is solid, but it's not. It's all part of their structures that they have built. And so the same thing there on Whidbey Island. You've got an eagle's nest, which means you're going to have an arc-like hub or structure literally sitting in the mountain there, which is why you've got Oprah so highly connected to that area, that facility. Go ahead to the next one. Her water tower place in Chicago, Illinois, in Cook County there. And look up, the Cooks. You're going to get the Cook family lines being highly involved, not only with things revolving around NORAD military base, but also being connected to, ancient lines of witchcraft and the Brotherhood system. But the former property, Oprah gradually assembled 4 adjoining units and even more than that. But let's look at that for a minute. So initially, she bought her initial property connected to the water tower place in Chicago in 1985 for an undisclosed amount. Now, that was the year that, she was connected and did the film The Color Purple. You have connected to this place her production studios, which is called Harpo Studios. Now, who knows what a harpy is? A harpy is a siren like creature. And there's a luring, a drawing of men. It's a certain form of, we'll say, witchcraft, and it's going to be connected to certain types of siren like spirits, your incubus and your succubus spirits. So, look at her symbol. Where else do we see a very similar symbol to Harpo Studios? We see that same kind of structure and symbol for CERN. Now, why in the world, is Oprah having a symbol that is so highly connected to magic? In fact, it goes deeper because, that symbol, does it connect to your Sanhedrin and the pomegranate that the Sanhedrin have, where, you get all these words around it representing your Solomonic magic, your spiritual gates. It does connect to that. Now, in years to follow, starting in 1992, she bought the first adjacent property or unit for 1.6 million, or sorry, 1.06 million. Then in 1993, she bought another one for 1.5 million. Then in 1994, yet another one for another million. Then in 2015, she purchased a duplex that was right by there for 4.625 million. So just in this area, not knowing the amount of her first place, you've already got, over $10 million invested into this water tower place. And you've got to ask, what the hell is under the water tower place? Like, why would she want to spend over $10 million in this area? Notice that right in front of that place, notice that stack that goes up. That stack is connected to a Catholic church and is connected to an incinerator. Now, why would you want to live so close to an incinerator? Look at the building behind Tower Place. You've got in the architectural design all these X's. What does that symbol have significance to in the system? They even go up and form diamonds. Is there a purpose in that? Is that significant? It very well could be. So when you look at that area, that church is the Holy Name Cathedral, and that is the diocese. Why does Oprah live right next to the Chicago diocese? Let's go to the next screen and look at some of the symbols. I think, do we have one with the next? Yeah, that one. We'll come back to the other one. So look at the Chicago area. We see, some symbols in that. We see the pearl with the child. That's going to connect to some of your ancient areas of Galicia and the protecting of the holy seed, which they're going to see as the female lines connected to Mary Magdalene and Jesus's child, which is, not true, but this is what they teach in the system. Really it's going to go back to mothers of darkness, and, the pearl represents those that they, have bred in the system for particular things. Um, then you get the ship representing your Priory of Zion. You get the Native American representing your Order of the Red Men. And you get the shield with the blue and the red stripes representing your Sons of Liberty, which is a group in your sovereign military. And all of that being connected. And when we see what I call the floating little shields, it tells you that that's kind of the, uh, you know, like your next layer under the ground, meaning they've got something special. What does the wheat represent? That's where your sovereign military, your Sons of Liberty, are going to go to get their wages. But then it's floating because it means that there are things underneath it. So, you've got territories under there where your priory is going to have access, your mothers are going to have access, and your Order of the Red Men are going to have access to special things. And we see at the bottom, numbers, and we see on your your right side numbers. You get several underground submarine line hubs that are coming out of that Chicago area. And they're identifying in the symbols the layers. Well, you also get those underground hubs connected to your Archdiocese of Chicago. I would think that that would be a pretty valid explanation for exactly why Oprah wants to have so much money invested in the Tower Place, why she's right literally at the back door of the Archdiocese. What does that give her connection to? Underground submarine lines. What is the Priory of Zion connected to? You get a connection there with your Smithsonian, your Audubon Society, your United Nations, it all, your military bases. She's highly interconnected with all of those places. And it goes beyond just, from one state to another, one country to another. You even have access to your underground water cities and, secret territories, which gets into other lands. Now, this diocese is highly connected to somebody named in my affidavits who is the high priest there, Brady, and you also get Timothy M. Dolan out of New York being highly connected to this area. All of that being, that diocese is filed under the Order of the Phoenix, and we see the IHS in that. So beyond the priory, what does that IHS represent? It represents Jesuits. And notice how the Phoenix's body is made to look like a heart, and then you have the head looking like flames. Where does that imagery go back to? That's an ancient symbol for your Order of St. Augustine, which we see, Pope Leo filed under. There's some significant things with that image when you see it with the dagger or the arrows, or all the daggers through it. It represents something. When you see that flaming heart with just like a pierced mark through it, that represents something different. And that's going to connect to your Selene women. And that's also going to connect to the vampirism. Excuse me. So, you beyond your naval station there off of the Great Lakes, you have a lot more military. In fact, they've expanded that military underground there in Chicago. And when you go into the area now, you see all of these big, the windmills. And those windmills extend all the way from the Chicago area to Delphi, Indiana. And that area is very significant in the training of priestesses. And you're talking, it's about a 2 to 3 hour drive outside of the Chicago area is how far they have made the extensions for the military base there under Chicago. So that should kind of give you a clue as to how massive that facility is now. It really is their largest and the heart of everything here in the United States. Um, so, it's massive. Let's go ahead to the next one. This is the Harpo Inc., again, her productions company and media company, founded in 1986. And, this extension's in the West Hollywood, California area. She shortens it and has the own, with that W in the middle. And, that's significant because the M and the W represent things in the system. The chevron or W in that direction, it's going to be under a certain, like, both your W and M connect back to points on the stars when they're doing their Kabbalah magic and are going to connect to certain entities. So, they'll use that symbol to represent archangel connections. They also will use it to represent forms of sex magic. The W would be representing, two chalices together, which, gets into the breeder programs that focus on girls and, using girls in the breeder programs. Like, they'll impregnate during the spring and fall equinoxes and then prematurely develop or deliver the infants for ritual on the following equinox. Now, we've talked about that with Oprah. We've talked about her connection to the schools, all of that, especially in the Africa areas. And, we've already had that on our mind, that is what she does. And we're seeing it even in her symbology, that declaration of what she's involved in. And, it just continues to get deeper and deeper. Let's go ahead to the next one. Her rolling prairie farm in LaPorte County, Indiana. Now, Indiana also has a huge underground, and you get different boys programs that were connected to some of those areas. This looks more like a country estate, but there are some interconnections. First, I want to point out the gate and the sign on the gate. I call that kind of like your scroll effect. You'll see that same style in certain coat of arms. And what does it mean? It will be represented to territories that have underground treasuries. In my island extravaganza, I decode the coat of arms for the Bermuda Islands, and you'll find that same effect on the coat of arms for the Bermuda Islands. So, again, we need to ask what's under this facility. Is there, a connection with the underground treasury? Is there more? Does it connect to a biolab? You would get a lot of your Nazi biolabs. They would have connections to underground farms or ranches. That would be how they would hide them. And it would give them access to experiment on animals without people really asking questions. So you get, this not being far from your Diocese of Gary. You have your LaPorte, Starkey, and Deanery area. and your St. John Cantry and Rolling Prairie area. So it kind of sits in between, like that diocese covers a lot of these little areas around there. Then you have your Hessler Naval Armory and Indiana, Army National Guard, and your U.S. Army Reserve Training Center out of, all not far from there. But are there more military areas nearby? I think there are. And, her properties give her the ability to supply for a lot of areas and to be the main supplier. Yeah, let's go to the next one. And yeah, I see Murnay put up a comment how the gate kind of looks, the gate arches in the middle give an archangel wings feel. Yeah, they totally do. Like your Ark of the Covenant, the wings going up and over. Absolutely, they do. Let's go ahead to the next one there. So, when we look at the symbols, notice like it's not by accident. Look, we see those same wings for the Catholic Diocese of Gary, LaPorte, Starkey, and Deanery. And what's the image underneath the wings? That's a golden censer. Now, you can look up the initiates of the flame, which we've been decoding all the symbols in there. This book is a high-level reflection book written by Manly P. Hall, who was the head of the Masons. And, in that book, it tells you, like, it's coded. It's meant to be a book of reflection to show their symbols, how they use them, what they mean. You will find that censer in there. And what do they say about it? It says, as the perfume rising from the incense burner was acceptable in the sight of the Lord, so may my words be sweet incense acceptable in the sight of the Most High. And then the very next line in this book goes into the ancient Hierophant, and they offered sacrifices and spices, right? So, what is it connected to? Altars. But you're going to get a couple special things with this. A lot of your elite mansions would have hookahs or opium sensors that would be connected to them. And they would have the smoke constantly going with the opium or the heroin in it. And there would be places where they could get that psychedelic drugs or that psychedelic effect and have access to the spiritual world and to ascending into the angelic world. Again, we get those wings in a certain formation, that connecting to your high level Eastern stars and priestesses and the capes that they wear. And you also get a connection with the sweet smell. Like when you see that, it will get into their perfume and product lines. Well, what are some of the things besides the drugs and the other things that they provide or supply? The psychedelics, you get the oils. And this is huge because then, think about some of her things she promotes. What are some of her products? You get the whole bath line. She doesn't get into perfumes per se. She always promotes others' perfumes. But what were you get the bath line fragrances, and you get the Lolita bubble bath. Now, that name is very interconnected and very similar to what else? You get the Lolita, but she had the Lolia bubble bath, right? Is it connected to the Lolita Express and the plane that would go to Epstein Island. Was there a direct connection from, the Indiana area to there? Probably. Um, when we look at that Indiana area, they're highlighting a certain church and diocese there in their image, and that building having access to certain things. Then you get Camp Atterbury as one of the military training centers there, and you get a naval armory, um, that's in a very specific formation. Now, when we see the rounded buildings like that, like the naval armory, that was, very common for the armories and the treasure buildings. So you see kind of that same rounded building with your um, your Vatican Bank. You see it with at some of your star forts. We see that same rounding in some of our Capitol buildings where they will have the treasuries and the money, and then we also see it in the Bordelene Library for Oxford. So you'll see it in different places, and it usually tells you there's a treasury of some sort, whether that's items, whether that's weapons, or books, money. It can be anything. Now, with that sweet perfume as well, with the censer, they will use that symbol also to mark areas where they're burning things. They see death as a sweet smell. So you would see that symbol many times connected to places where they have incinerators. Um, that gets into something much darker and deeper, which goes back to Gloria Vanderbilt. And you get areas where they literally are going to mummify. And you'll get into some of the ancient books, the Book of the Dead, the Book of Life for the Egyptians, and they're raising up, giving wings to the dead, is kind of a way they would put it. Now, the black and white symbology that we see for the diocese there, that's going to go to your base groups of Knights of Malta, but at the higher levels, that black and white is going to go to your Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Solomon and your Teutonic Knights. So those will be the sovereign military that are serving in those areas. Again, that will connect to secret territories, like those knights will be assigned to sovereign territories overseen by your Order of the Phoenix, which one of the most famous ones we've looked at is Meklon, which is down, below like your Florida areas, kind of situated between Florida and Cuba, and then extending over into areas that get into some of the islands over there. So that's what all of that means. Let's go ahead to our next one here. You get your Fisher Island penthouse in the Miami-Dade County areas in Florida. This was a massive property, 6,170 square feet, 4 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. Just that's massive. Oprah owned the Villa Del Mar penthouse at Fisher Island Drive from 1995 to supposedly 2001. The residence had 20-foot ceilings and wrapped around ocean terraces. I think this was probably one of her most strategic properties. It's claimed she sold it for $6.5 million in 2001. But what was all happening before this, before she sold this property and even purchased it? In the late 80s, early 1900s, you had Oprah Winfrey very terrified about things coming out about what she did with the Department of Defense, the Central Intelligence, the military bases, the programs, the training for children in the brotherhood system, you know, her connection to different energy companies and the supply and chain. And because of her concern about certain people being able to talk about what she did, she joined forces with, at that time, Senator Biden and John Walsh, who was known, for things happening to his son Adam, and he started America's Most Wanted. They all joined forces and developed the Child Protection Act, and she was one of the biggest pushers for that. What that act did was it made any organization working with children, like whether that was schools, churches, daycares, they had, by law, they were then required to do certain background checks to make sure that people were supposedly safe to work with children. But what in reality did this act really do? It gave, access to brotherhood people. Basically anybody who applied, they would check, and really, they put people in there that would protect the brotherhood system itself. um, so that maybe, if a child was really vocal, they might bring out things about sexual abuse, but it made sure that nothing about the true system or the sovereign military was brought forward, and, highly monitored um, children that broke the code of silence. So, it put a lot of people in the areas with children, and the monitoring, the silencing of children from being able to tell. So all that was happening right before she bought this property. And we've shown, in some of the episodes we've done, how there's you know, train railways that go straight from that, through that Miami area down below and straight into the water, giving access to Meklon. So I think that's highly why she had this property. You get a high connection in that area to some of the Henry Flagler um, mansions, as well as um, I'm forgetting the name of it right at this second, but you've got one of their grand high priest and priestess training areas. What is it called? It'll come to me in a minute. But one of their areas where they go through their sufferings uh, and go through, horrific things with their training. Um, it's like right on the tip of my brain. But anyway, there's a mansion there beyond the Flagler ones that they use. And this property gives her strategy to be in that area for some of those things. Let's go ahead to the next one. So we see, Miami area, you've got the single palm tree that often connects to Solomonic magic and represents that base Solomonic magic easel. When we see the feathers or the palms on top, that's going to go back to a certain form of magic, which you get the obey magic, which I cover in my island decode. And then we see in some of the other symbols for the Miami-Dade area, we see the half sunshine representing your golden dawn. We see the big ship representing your Priory of Zion. They will use the palm trees also, like when we see it like in that lower sigil. That also can represent your order of the cedars of Lebanon, your tall trees. And then notice how you get the nuclear symbol below. Why does the Miami area have a nuclear symbol? What's under there? And we see that in connection to your priestesses. What in the world does that represent underneath there? So you'll see, in the archdiocese, we see those interesting, thicker gold crosses. Where will we find those? Those are going to be connected to your Golden Dawn as well as certain forms of Egyptian magic. And we see in the diocese, they've got a separator telling us there's stuff below ground. And that's going to get into things that they do in connection to the waterways under there. We also see the Homestead Air Force Base with your fighter wing, and notice their unique symbol there. You get what looks like all those paper airplanes, arrows that are kind of twisted, and then lightning bolts. When we see the checkers in the Masonic stuff, that connects to underground spaces, reflection rooms. That's how they use it to signify that there's spaces below and special areas either above ground, up in the air, or below ground. This symbol is telling us that basically they've got stuff above the ground, up in the air. Is there a floating military island above that area, and that being used as a docking hub? It's very possible. So some curious things out of that area. Let's go ahead to the next one. Now, some of her past, and that's going to get even more interesting. You get her Franklin childhood residence and family connection out in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, is there a direct connection between Oprah Winfrey and Dolly Parton? Maybe there is. There's a lot in that Nashville area, but even further, you get some of the smaller surrounding areas and territories in that Tennessee area that are going to be highly connected to brotherhood. You're also going to have connections to that area to Biltmore and Gloria Vanderbilt. And you get not far from there the Greenbrier area, the Greenbrier Hotel, which is, used as a secondary underground bunker for our seat of government. You'll get, the Greenbrier Hotel used both as a place for training priestesses as well as for its underground bunker facility, which is massive. So, a lot of interconnections with different high priestesses in that area, or grand high priestesses in that area. You get, the Tennessee Air National Guard connected, but more than that, you get Oak Ridge Lab, which, if we could use words to describe Oak Ridge Lab, I encourage people to watch the series Stranger Things. You get nuclear facilities in that area, which is highly connected to the training programs and the projects that Oprah is one of the suppliers for. Let's go to another one. Looking at those areas, you see again the shield with the stars, the stripes at the far left, with the eagle on top. That shield representing your sons of liberty, which always will go hand in hand with your order of the red men. So we see that that order and that sovereign military group high in that area. When you see the eagle with the wings bent, like the one on top of the shield, that represents your neo-Nazi junior training programs. So we're going to see a lot coming out of that area. We see the Fleur de Lis on top, which represents your Priory of Zion, which means you're going to have your priory meeting in those areas. We also see, in the diocese, notice the three stars, five-pointed stars in their symbology. You get that symbol being the same for your three-star generals. Notice that they've got a bird on top of that, a falcon. And, does that connect to, again, your priory, special councils, your Audubon Society, the worship of bird gods? Very highly likely it does. The five-pointed star, when you see that for the, brotherhood, it represents brotherhood, but it also represents the marriage of the Lamb and those ceremonies, which for them are going to include, sexual things. It's especially, homosexual sex. Now, in this, does it also represent, you'll see these three stars in different formations in the Tennessee area. Sometimes you'll see them forming a right side up triangle together. Other times you'll see them straight like this. But what does that represent? Does it get into their sex magic in certain forms? I think it does. Even notice how the formation of the three stars is with the 118th wing. You've got the upside down triangle. You've got the two airplanes strategically placed, and, a certain symbol with that top of the guitar. Go to Initiates of the Flame, look at the symbols. You're going to find that top of the guitar symbol matching the symbol of the thorax, also the symbol of the spade. What does that represent to the brotherhood? It represents a contract with the angel of death. In fact, the way that the airplanes are, the way that the top of that guitar is, that is something very specific. And that is going to connect to my cistern's decoding event coming up on in September on the 24th. I'm going to get into certain hand signs and what those signs mean and what entities and altars they connect to. It all gets into their magic, but what does it mean? Is it places where when they put that spade, that thorax on there, what do they do at that base? Does it connect to necromancy? It does. So, this being another area or territory where there's going to be things, beyond the necrophilia, they're going to get into forms of necromancy, all being under a contract with the angel of death. Let's get into the next one here. The Jumby Bay Island in Long Island. You get also Antigua and Barbuda. This former property was 6,170 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms. Pretty much the island, I think. But you get a lot of connections with islands. All of those, I think, is not just because she likes the area. How many houses does somebody need to own? And what's underneath them? You get, the St. John's Diocese near it, and you get the Antigua and Barbuda Defense Force, um, in that area. So there's just a lot of underground military facilities, underground water cities that Oprah is near, and to the point where, we really have to look at those interconnections to understand the full picture of her and what she's involved in. Do we have one more with that one? Yeah, so when we look at, the coat of arms for these, notice how the Antigua, the Barbuda, it's got a very particular coat of arms, and that coat of arms is very similar to the one we see for the General Council for the United Nations. In fact, you'll see the same pineapple at the top of that one. So this area is highly connected to the United Nations. You get that pineapple representing underground submarine hubs, the pineapples under the sea, and you'll see a direct connection to your United Nations with that. Notice how you've got the half sunshine in there. That's going to connect to several things, one of them being your golden dawn. Um, and then you see like kind of the white and the blue stripes. That literally represents, the images in this shield for that area represents certain areas and territories where that underground submarine line goes. The blue and the white stripes is going to go to two places. You have Aleppo, Syria, and you have Epstein Island. That's exactly where those sublines go from that area. And that's why Oprah wanted to have connections there. Um, so then look at in the middle there, the Archdiocese of St. John. Notice how we've got the Priory of Zion ship. We've got the half sun, the golden dawn. But there's a clover on that ship. That clover goes to your Hibernians, which is a very specific group. You're going to get supposedly from them more of a connection to Irish roots, your Irish brotherhood. And we get some senators that are Hibernians, a very particular one who's connected to the Indiana area, and highly connected to corn and agriculture. Um, but, that's the area where she's going to be supplying your Hibernians. And where else do we see that symbol? We see it a lot with your 4-H programs, which your Hibernians are the largest supplier in communities of your children's programs or educational things for the children, like your 4-H's, your Girl Scouts, your Boy Scouts. So they are highly interconnected with those programs within communities and purposely work. They get their way into schools and work hand in hand with the schools and the universities. So that's the interconnection there. And then we see the Antigua and Bermuda Defense Force, which is going to be, special military, connected to the underground in those areas and those submarine lines. Let's go ahead to the next one. We've got Oprah Winfrey's Leadership Academy for Girls. We've talked about this before in South Africa there. Notice she has some of the symbology for the school. You see the O representing for her name. But it's interesting here because notice how there's two lines going through that O. That O written in that oval shape represents a couple things. One, it goes back to the Hebrew letter theta, which gets into that also being a main symbol for the name of God. And notice how she's got that O in the ascending sunshine behind it, almost like a woman with a headpiece. Um, you get some of your female priestess headpieces looking exactly like that. Does Oprah have one? Absolutely, she does. And you're going to find a lot of connections for her in sorcery, divination. It's not just that she's a supplier, she's a high priestess. And, what orders is she all connected to? You've got Golden Dawn, Order of the Phoenix, um, you know, others, Eastern Star. What's some of the higher levels of that Eastern Star? You get into the Order of the Sphinx, your Daughters of the Nile, your Daughters of Sarah, Rebecca, Job, your Morning Stars. Um, you know, so a lot of different female orders, and her being a big supplier of raising up these women and girls to be priestesses. Um, and you're going to get in connection to that area your Archdiocese of Johannesburg, and you'll get your South African National Defense Force. Let's go ahead to the next one. Let's look at their symbols. Um, so notice we've talked before about the local municipality coat of arms. We've decoded that coat of arms in our Africa series, and I was trying to remember what we called that series. I know we were talking about the Clintons, got into all that. So I encourage you guys to go back, look for those episodes. We get into the specifics of the decodes, how that crown represents the 8 ritual seasons. You've got the middle, the breastplate of the eagle, how that connects back to some of your orders. We talked about the right side up triangle representing your holy contracts at one layer, and then the way the golden diamonds in that middle piece are upside down triangles, how they go back to your order of the priests of Melchizedek, and eventually like your odd fellows, some of those orders. But what we didn't talk about last time was at the top of that, you get the gold and the red triangle coming together, forming a diamond there. And then notice how you get a switch like an hourglass where that top gold triangle connects to the black triangle. And those are specific things, that top one representing those that, are ancient magicians out of the line of Egypt. And that's going to get into your Sword of Moses spell book, which is older than your Keys of Solomon. And then that golden black hourglass figure, that getting to a certain council group, which is your black tuxedos. We have underneath that the lotus flower, which we've decoded that with some of your um, initiates of the flame book. And, then we hop on over to our archdiocese there. We see that weird M shape that's going to connect to your Order of Milos, um, and that's going to get into certain forms of sex magic. For priestesses, it will get into your Order of Magdalene, which is very specific priestess group. I talk about that in my Winona, Minnesota decode, as well as in my Queen of Heaven workshop. And I get into, what's the fullness of that image with the Order of Magdalene. And you're going to see certain statues with the image of Mary that they use with that also, you'll usually see the image of Mary with the blue veil, and that tells you they've got the Order of Magdalene there. Most of the time, you'll also see the blue roses in connection to that, and that will get to a higher order, your Order of the Blue Rose, which is going to be high level, older, elite women in the system that are part of breeder programs, breeding certain boys and their genes and carrying those genes on. Now, notice you've got the X both in the top of that, your Chi-Rho symbol, and then you also see it with the spade and the pick, but we know where that spade goes back to. That's the gravedigger spade that you see in Initiates of the Flame, and that goes to their contracts with death. It goes to the necromancy, the necrophilia. So here we have another area where we're seeing that same symbology. That kind of V-shaped belt in the middle with all the black crosses on it, that tells you that you're going to have your sovereign military, your Knights of the Garter and the Bath there. And, when it's the black and white, usually, again, that will go to your Order of the Temple of Solomon Knights and your Teutonic Knights in particular. Then we see, all the way over to the right, we see the African National Defense Force symbol. And notice how strange that is. Again, we see an X, we see a shell, we see horns coming out of that shell. All of that is going to be connected to high priestesses. You're going to get some very specific things with that, which we're not going to fully get into today, but we see that V, the swords kind of in that V or that X shape. You see the spears, the lances, that's going to connect to some things, and certain rituals. Your lances are used a lot in your Gnostic masses, and you can get in those areas that are labeled for that your marriage to the beast ceremonies, which happen around September 5th to 7th every year. So that's the most common place where the lances, they represent where those Gnostic rituals are happening underground. Let's go ahead to the next one. So just some of her charitable foundation, look at how much she's invested in. It's a private foundation. It's labeled as a 501c3 nonprofit. It was established in 1987. That happened to be the year that the Lord delivered me out of the system. Literally, at a family funeral, I went to turn away from the grave and go to the car, and the Lord literally said to me, I have released you from them. That was the year Oprah basically pooed her pants and, began to try to establish protection for herself. But look at where she started funneling all of her money that year through this foundation. You have the Oprah Leadership Academy for girls. You've got OLA, which again is connected to her leadership foundation. You got the UNCF, United Negro College Fund Scholarship, marked with a torch representing your Order of Melchizedek. You get in the W kind of V shape, the hand form for the Boys and Girls Clubs of South Africa. You get the Women's Foundation marked with, again, that W in certain formation representing sex magic. Again, you've got the hidden hand symbol and the dress for success imagery. Um, you get the vital voices, the I am a girl, uh, international plan. You get the feeding of America, Habitat for Humanity, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Community Foundation, the Red Cross, um, which is under the cross for your Knights of Malta. um, they funnel a lot of money for countries that have disasters. You get the CARE program, humanitarian aid and poverty relief. um, again, is that imagery just random for their symbol, or is it connected to the United Nations? You get Operation Blessing International Disaster Relief, with the O looking like an eye of Horus. And you get the Save the Children Relief and Health Education. So much that a lot of money being funneled. Um, let's go ahead to another one. Her total assets, I think it's not giving the fullness, but it's claimed, over 172 million. You have, charitable disbursements being over 18 million, total revenue being over 19 million. You have her foundation trustees include herself, Gail King, who we've talked about, their connections even with the Kardashians and the Jenners. And you get Robert Greene. Ironically, most of your programmers, Nazi programmers in the system, all of your doctors for those programs in charge of girls would have different colored last names: Dr. Green, Dr. White, Dr. Black, Dr. Blue, Dr. Gold, all of those representing certain things within the programs. Does Oprah have a direct connection with what formerly was known as Tavistock, which, when it came into the United States, split into Stafford Research Institute, the Aspen Foundation, and MIT? She does. And, high connections to the Chicago military base, to Colonel Michael Aquino, to John O'Brennan, um, to Hillary Clinton, to Michael Carcock, and the Mothers of Darkness. She being, one of their highly favored people and having a lot of access, being able to do a lot of supply with the position they put her in, and, working at an international level, um, funneling, distributing, supplying the system's supply chain for, their programs, their projects, their rituals, their breeder programs, you name it. She is the top supplier, and everybody else is just underneath her. So I think that's it. I think that covers it.
Wow, she makes Epstein look like
Yeah, he
a,
was small beans compared to Oprah. He was
yeah,
just a location, you
totally.
know, just a location.
Very big organization. She is, not has, she is, and
Hmm.
obviously has. Anyway, wow. Okay, well, thank you for that. And then, guys, could we start maybe 15 or 20 minutes later? We're supposed to start at 3:30, but we ended quite late now. So you're good to start 15 minutes later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So we will see you back at 15:45, 3:45 p.m. South African time. So 15 minutes later. Jess, is there anything you just want to say in closing?
No,
Um,
just a reminder, go back, watch some of the episodes
yeah.
we did on the Clintons where we decode some of those same symbols. Watch our former episodes we've done on Oprah. We've covered her quite a bit. And then I encourage you because, she's highly connected to the training of priestesses in the system and the different militaries. My sister's workshop coming up, I'm going to cover quite a bit of that. So I encourage you all to hop on over to the kingdomlivingwithjessie.com and register for that coming up in September here. All right, let's go ahead and pray. And Lord, we thank you that you bring all things to truth and light. We thank you, Lord, that we can know the truth. And Lord, certainly you hold to account. We're not blind. We're not stupid people. We thank you that we can see things as they are, that there are things that we can do to make a shift and a change, even in prayer. You've given us such an authority and the authority to be able to tear down the strongholds. We thank you for that these people will not be able to establish strongholds for themselves, but you will restore the things that have been stolen from the children, their lives, their future, their hope, their businesses, their livelihoods. We ask that all of it would be restored to them in the name of Jesus. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Jessie, and thank you, everybody. So we'll see you back in about 35 minutes, 15 minutes later than what we originally started. Okay, so wherever in the world you are, 15 minutes later. Okay, guys. And then we're going to be obviously chatting about the cat people and the black nobility. So join us for installment 2. Yeah? Until then, just be cool. If this broke something open, if you recognized yourself in the testimony, if your body responded before your mind understood, the next step isn't more information. It's pattern work. Decode what your nervous system built to survive. Dismantle the story that keeps it running. Reorganize through the body and choose from the person you're becoming, not from the pattern that formed when you were too small to choose. That's Solutions. Link below. The body is the record. Let's listen.